All right, welcome back, Florida Football Insiders Podcast, where you just heard from Joey Johnston talking USF. Now we're going to talk to Matt Murschel. Matt covers UCF and Florida State for the Orlando Sentinel. You've heard Matt on the podcast several times throughout the football year. And as we get through signing day and the bowl game for Florida State coming up here, no better person to talk to than Matt. So welcome back, Matt. Happy holidays.
Happy holidays to you. How are you doing today?
Things are going well. All right, let's talk signing day for Florida State and UCF. We don't need to talk specific names and all that a whole lot. Do you think that I know, one of the things you heard out of Florida State was that they were pretty active in the transfer portal. They got some guys, some need positions. The other part you heard was not all their guys are playing in the bowl games. None of their guys are not playing, and that's really something that you've heard a lot out of Coach Norvell and company. Just talk about signing day for both Florida State and UCF a little bit, and what are your thoughts?
Well, I think for Florida State, this wasn't like an extraordinary class. I mean, if you look at the numbers and you look at rankings, which fans love to do, this wasn't a class I think everyone's going to go, oh, wow. But it was a solid class from Mike Norvell. And I think what it did is it addressed some needs from the high school level. And as you mentioned, he jumped in the portal and once again, Mike Norvell has become the transfer portal master, of being able to get guys. I mean, he added up some big pieces on the offensive line. I think Jeremiah Byers, the transfer from UTEP, is probably one of the most elite, almost step in, play and ready guys. He can probably step on that right tackle spot right away and be a contributor. Probably one of the better ones they've picked up. Got a couple other guys. They landed a guy actually yesterday in Braden Fisk, who is one of the top defensive ends that they've been, that's out there in the transfer portal. He's going to be huge for them. Again, he gives them strength at that position. Seems to be a trend for Mike Norvell, where he's gone out the portal and grabbed, every year it seems to grab an edge rusher, because he wants to kind of fill that spot. So they were able to handle that as well. They got a couple of good tight ends as well. Yaham Bell is supposed to be a guy who's really ready to go. A guy who could step in, gives Mike Norvell a different option, a different look at the tight end position. So as a whole, as a class, I think the class was strong. I think Akeem Williams is going to be really good, who was the high school, their top high school recruit that they signed, 5-star player, who I think will be a guy who could step in and play almost immediately. And they also filled some other needs there. I think same can be said for UCF. UCF's class isn't something that you would go, wow, it was amazing. They got some good, solid position players. They added 2 or 3 4-stars, something that this program hasn't had in I think ever. Is that many 4-stars in a class. But this is a program that's moving on from the group of 5 to the Power 5 in the Big 12. So they're going to have to continue to add some of these pieces and continue to get stronger on the recruiting trail. So again, I think Gus Malzahn has a lot more work to do than Mike Norvell does in his class. I mean, I think he's probably going to hit the portal a little hard as well. I think they've added some pieces from other SEC schools, talented wide receiver, talented offensive lineman. I think that's what Gus is going to continue to do, is just keep adding these pieces. Let's not forget the portal window will close, and then it'll open up again after spring. And I think that's where you're going to see maybe some more movement. But I think the biggest telling sign for both, mainly for Florida State in this, is, as you mentioned, there weren't a lot of opt-outs. I mean, when you go to this, Florida State goes to this bowl game this week, they have all their players. And it's something I'm going to write about tomorrow about. This is an amazing fact that Mike Norvell has been able to keep a team together when every other team in the country, it seems like, has players who are opting out or going in the transfer portal and leaving the program. This is going to be probably the best lineup you're going to see bowl-wise when you talk about from roster from top to bottom, because those guys are all coming back.
Yeah, the one big loss, I know, Mikey Keene, the quarterback at UCF, did he not? I believe he.
Yeah, he transferred. He left and he's going to Fresno State to play him. I think Mikey's decision was based kind of on, he was the starter last year, filled in for Dylan Gabriel. A lot of people felt like he was going to be the starter this year.
Yeah.
But then the John Rice Plumlee comes in for the transfer portal from Ole Miss, and Gus really kind of embraced that. I think he really kind of wanted that John Rice fit, kind of what they were trying to do offensively. So Mikey decided to leave. So I think there's going to be some interest at that quarterback spot. They've got some Timmy McLean is a transfer they brought in this past season, who had to sit out from USF. He's a very talented player. I think he can help them out. And Tommy Castellanos, who is the backup right now for Plumlee, he's an up-and-coming, player who's been on the roster. They have a lot of enthusiasm for him. And so I think, Gus is kind of looking around thinking, okay, fine, we just got to add pieces to kind of get some depth at some positions.
Yeah, and give obviously the culmination of the year that UCF loses in the championship game to Tulane. I think it was a good game. Both they beat Tulane a month or so back prior to the championship game, and then they lose to them the second time around. I think success. I think from all indications, very successful season in Orlando. Everybody's pretty happy.
Somewhat. I mean, I think people felt like this was a team that could win the AAC this year. It felt like I know they got to the championship game and lost, but there were a lot of people who felt like this was a team that could get to 10, 11 wins. They felt like they had enough talent there as well. So to have some of the losses they had were difficult. I think, obviously the Louisville game, they were up at halftime.
Right.
They gave that game away in the second half. You mentioned the loss in the championship game. Obviously, there was a lot there. And they faced some challenges with injuries. I mean, John Rice Plumlee was hurt, had a hamstring injury, really kind of limited in that championship game. So there were just opportunities that fans think they could have done a little bit better. But again, now you're making the move to the Big 12. Everyone's just happy to kind of put the season behind them and see what's going to happen next year.
So let's wrap up with Florida State in the bowl game. I know Florida State's going to be super excited. They think they've kind of turned the corner here. 9-3 finish. A lot of excitement coming out of Tallahassee. I think this will be one of the few bowl teams in the country that'll have no lack of motivation. They will be very excited to play. You get in some of these bowl games, you're not sure what the motivation level is for some of these teams. I think by the indication of everybody staying and not opting out, I think that's a great sign. I think you're going to have no problem having a very motivated Florida State team to play Oklahoma.
Yeah, I mean, it was interesting. We spoke to they had media day yesterday for the Cheez-It Bowl, and a lot of the Florida State players were there, and they talked a lot about, they want to get that 10th win. The 10th win to them is important. They've seen the Florida State brand returning to where it needs to be in the national landscape. And people are talking about Florida State again. It's talking about in the national rankings. And all these players said, listen, we understand how important this is. And and I think the thing that kind of helps them along on this process too is that Jordan Travis is committed to coming back next year. I said that. Tatum Bethune's coming back. Micah Pittman, Trey Benson, all these solid players. Normally at this time of year, these guys are maybe on the fence. I don't know what I'm going to do. They all came back. They all came back and announced this early. And they're trying to convince Jared Verse and Jamie Robinson to come back because they're saying, hey, man, you come back, imagine what we could be like. And so there is so much positivity surrounding this program right now. They feel like just going in this game, man, we've got so much to go for. And they're going to play, I'm going to guarantee, it's probably going to be a sellout. They're really close to it. I think they got less than 1,500 tickets left. It's going to be a sellout. It's going to be a very, very pro Florida State crowd in the stadium. And so it's going to be a great atmosphere. They understand exactly what's going on. They want to kind of continue to push, what they're trying to do. And next year they realize there's going to be a lot of people who are going to look at Florida State and maybe actually put them in some preseason rankings when we get down to it.
Oh yeah. And the other interesting nugget here is you got Dylan Gabriel, the former UCF quarterback, coming back to town, and he's now the quarterback for Oklahoma.
Yeah, it was interesting. We spoke to Dylan yesterday for a while. It was kind of a surreal moment for me because I covered Dylan, and Mackenzie Milton, the former UCF quarterback, was there as well. He was actually friends with Dylan, and they were both there, and they kind of were talking for a bit. And it's kind of eerie to look back and see like these two UCF guys who were still there. But Dylan talked about his kind of journey from how he left UCF. He went in the transfer portal, so it was a very difficult decision. But he felt like it was best to move on. He got to Oklahoma. It wasn't a great year. I mean, they're 6-6. They've had some struggles. Obviously, they're going into this game trying to maybe come off of some positivity, getting a win maybe against a top 15 ranked team.
Yep.
They won't have some of the key players guys who entered the portal, as we talked about on the flip side for Florida State. They've got some guys who entered the portal and left, and guys who opted out. So it's going to be kind of a hodgepodge roster, I think, for Oklahoma. So Dylan wants to kind of showcase and hey, I'm back in Orlando. I want to showcase what we are able to do. And he's got a decision on his own. I mean, listen, afterwards, he's got to decide whether or not he wants to try to go for the NFL or if he wants to come back for another season in Oklahoma. And I talked to Jeff Levy, their offensive coordinator, who was a former UCF quarterbacks coach. And he said, listen, Dylan wants to focus on this game and doesn't want to worry about that decision, though they have had conversations about it. So it's going to be interesting. So Oklahoma wants to finish strong. They would love to do it against a great team.
Yeah, I saw some social media pictures. You like the hot dogs over there. They had a good media day spread.
Yes, they did. They actually had some really good, some good media day spread. What's really interesting was, side note, is that most of the Oklahoma beat writers weren't there at the event because of the weather, the travel delays that have kind of hampered the country. They weren't even there. So it was literally maybe about a handful of us from local media, Florida State media as well. They're kind of doing the interviews. So it was interesting, but it was a good opportunity to kind of catch up with everybody. And like I said, we talked to Jared Verse, we talked to Jamie Robinson about their decisions maybe to possibly come back. Jared said both of them said their moms have been very crucial in this decision. They've really kind of stepped forward and almost acted like managers for them and have taken on the responsibility of letting them focus on football and worried about kind of creating their, getting everything set up. In fact, Jared Verse said his mom has created a war room in their house where she's got a wall pinned up with stuff and pros and cons and things like that. So she's really handling it. And Jared said, honestly, it's been a blessing for me because I can focus on football and enjoying this week of bowl preparation.
Who do you like in the semifinal playoff games?
Oh, I'm going to say it's going to be Georgia. It's probably going to be Georgia, Michigan getting into the national championship. I think Georgia's got a stronger defense. I think Ohio State's got a chip on the shoulder and would love to come into this game and kind of pull the upset, but Georgia's played really well most of the season. TCU's had a great run, and but I think Michigan's again a team that's been there before. I don't think people understand when you haven't been in these kind of situations how difficult it can be and challenging for a coach and a team to kind of put all that aside while you're focusing on what you're going to do. And so I like this idea of Georgia and Michigan going to the national title game.
All right, Matt, tell everybody where they can find all your great bowl coverage and all the great work you do with the Orlando Sentinel.
Yeah, they can go to orlandosentinel.com, or you can follow me on Twitter at @OSMattMurschel, and got all sorts of coverage for this week from bowls and transfer portals and all sorts of NIL deals. So never seems to end, does it?
It does not. And like I said, you'll get a little break here in a little bit, but not for another couple of weeks for sure. Well, Matt, appreciate the time, man. Great. Keep up the great work covering all things Orlando sports and Florida State athletics. Really appreciate the time. That's the end of our podcast for the week. Appreciate you finding us on the Florida Football Insiders podcast. I'm your host, Jason. Again, we talked to Coach Jim Leavitt. We talked to Joey Johnston and now Matt Murschel. Try to give you a good recruiting update as well as bowl updates here as we get to the semifinals. And find us on Twitter at JPO Sports. Appreciate you finding us, and we'll see you next week on the Florida Football Insiders podcast.